Now, here's Dr. Stan Freger.
Hi, welcome. Well, first hour was interesting. We talked about merging adulthood. Now we're going to shift gears. You're an adult, and you've fallen in love. But then, maybe you've fallen out of love. Goodness gracious, it gets complicated. Let me tell you about a guest joining us, and Sheila Dean is a relationship coach. She's a speaker, and she's written some very interesting books. I'm sure she'll tell you about it. And what's interesting, for 20 years she spent time as an estate planning attorney, and before retiring from the law to begin relationship coaching, she was really involved in the dynamics of married couples. When you do family law, that's bound to happen. And after being with them for a long time, she saw what they were doing to each other, what they were doing to themselves, and because of that long-term involvement in her clients' lives, she found herself counseling them on relationship issues as much as on legal matters. So, welcome, Sheila Dean.
Hi there. It's good to be back.
Yeah, your book was really fun. You have a lot of humor in it. You got great cartoons, I have to tell you.
Oh, don't you love Randy's cartoons?
Yeah, great.
He's the best.
Great
yeah.
cartoons. And then also staying on with us is marriage and family therapist. He's president this year of our Kentucky Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, professor at the University of Louisville's Kent School of Social Work, my good friend, Dr. Eli Karam. Nice for you to stay with us, Dr. Karam.
Enjoying it. It's part of the Sunday Night Family.
There you go. So it's the Sunday Night Family, and I get emails, and I get all kinds of information. And by the way, check us out on Facebook, because we have lots of good stuff up there as well, or on our website at Frager.com. Having said all that, Sheila, you were married for a couple of years when you were young, and then bad things happened, huh?
Yeah, I guess we could call that my starter marriage. That's what they call it these days. Yeah, I was married way too young and so ill-prepared, as so many people are, to get married, and really didn't find my soulmate until I was on the shady side of 40. And been happily married now for almost, 14 years coming up next month.
And that's the Dale that you talk about in your book.
And that is Dale, who's so kind to let me talk about him in my books.
And then you go talk about him on radio and television all over the country.
I do, but I only say nice things about him. Well, once in a while I'll tell a story about him, but he lets me do that, and he's a great guy to let me tell our personal story, because, you know, I give out a lot of advice, but I'm just like everybody else. Sometimes I fall down, sometimes I don't follow my own advice, and it's nice, I think, for people to know that, you know, I'm not sitting in an ivory tower somewhere. I'm actually living my life just like they are and making mistakes, too.
Well, tell me a little bit about you were an attorney for many years, and then you become a relationship coach. What's going on there?
Well, you know, if I'd been a litigator or if I'd been a divorce attorney, I don't know if I would have become a relationship coach. But doing estate planning, your clients really have to share a lot of personal information with you. They have to tell you about their kids that are in bad marriages or are chemically dependent, and you get to know a lot about a couple, and you see how they handle these things. And I could tell a lot, really, just by the way a couple would enter my office. Did he hold the door? Did she thank him? Did they talk while they were waiting, or did they, you know, each pull out a book, or she pull out her knitting, and they didn't talk to each other? And it's just watching their dynamics, I could learn a lot. And I really felt that to serve my clients well, I needed to understand even more about the dynamics of how relationships work. And, of course, having messed one up myself, I wanted to know how to get it right the next time. So I really studied a lot about relationships, and before long I realized I was, you know, coaching my clients as much on legal matters as much on relationship matters as I was on legal matters. And I really enjoyed it and really felt that I was adding to people's lives in a really positive way, so I made the switch.
Now, a figure that you hear a lot is that about 50% of all marriages end up in divorce. Is that still true?
Yeah, actually, you know, the divorce rate is going down, at least in most demographics, but it seems to be increasing in the boomer demographic. So much so that the term gray divorce has been coined to describe this phenomena of long-term marriages ending. People who've been married 30, 40 years are getting a divorce. You know, it's kind of the Al and Tipper Gore situation where you think, wow, this is a marriage that's solid and they seem to be doing well, and then suddenly they say, well, we love each other very much, but we're getting a divorce.
What do you think, Dr. Karam?
Yeah, one of the explanations for that is this idea, yes, that we've focused our life together, and 1974, believe it or not, represented the year divorce replaced death as the most common endpoint to marriage, and the take home from that is people are living longer now. So if I'm 60 or whatever and I am not fully content in my relationship and my children have launched, as we were talking about the last hour, I have options now, and I'm not going to spend the next 20 plus years quality life being with something that is not fulfilling for me. So we see a spike in that divorce with that the boomer generation.
Well, that's right. Until death do us part can seem like a really long time when 40 is the new, 60 is the new 40.
It's a lot of years going there. Tell you what, that music says we're going to take a quick little break.
Okay.
And we'll be right back with Sheila Dean. The book's called Redate Your Mate, 4 Steps to Falling in Love All Over Again. We'll find out what those 4 steps are. Not that I need it, of course. Or Dr. Karam. We'll be right back. Keep it here.
571-0970.
All right, hi and welcome. I'm psychologist Stan Frager with marriage and family therapist and professor Dr. Eli Karam, and with Sheila Dean. And Sheila's written a book called Redate Your Mate, 4 Steps to Falling in Love All Over Again. And so we hear things like, in your own experience now, Sheila, is date night important? We talk about a date night, and you hear family therapists like Dr. Karam will promote, well, maybe you need a date night with your wife. What do you think about that? And then we'll get Dr. Karam to defend his turf.
Well, I absolutely think date night's a good thing for spouses to do. They need to get out. They need to have some fun. They need to try new things. But redating, at least how I define redating, isn't about date night. While date night is really important, when I use the term redate, I talk about doing it again, starting over, wiser and smarter, but not with a new spouse, but with the spouse you have. And so, yeah, date night is really important, and that's a part of keeping the spark alive and keeping the fun in your relationship. But it's not enough to keep a relationship together for the long term. The
whether you call it date night or sometimes refer to it as protected time, the notion is this: couples, even the couples that love each other, especially in long-term enduring relationships, you operate on out-of-date knowledge of your partner, and even if you haven't seen them for the week, with kids getting in the way, job, there's significant things. If you are not making the time for each other, you're going to be operating on out-of-date information. You're going to lose curiosity for your partner. So what the protected time or date night does is it gives you something to look forward to in the week. So, I know I'm going to have 3 or 4 straight big-time days at work, but I know my wife and I, Thursday evening, have child care, and we have a date set up. So psychologically, I have something to look forward to, and that can help a lot buffering these other stresses, especially if your spouse or your partner wants to kind of be with you. So it's very helpful, and it's something that often slides by the wayside in these long-term relationships.
Well,
and it's got to be
easy when you get involved.
That's right. I mean, my husband and I don't have children at home, but we still have date night because it's easy to find yourself in the rut you said you'd never fall into. It's when date night, what used to be date night, rolls around, you end up in front of the TV with a delivery pizza, and it's if you don't take the time to talk and you don't take the time to get out of your environment to do that, you do lose touch with each other.
Well, I know we don't have an official night, but about once a week my wife will say something to this effect. You think you'd like to go out to dinner tonight? I looked at the schedule and it's open. Do I think I'd like to go out to dinner? Do I have a choice?
Well,
yeah,
we
interpreted that's we're going
going
out to dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Just get ready, Bubba, because it's happening. Yeah, I've learned this. Would you like to see a movie tonight? She isn't asking me if I want to see a movie. We're going to the movie.
But I think with date night can be even more fun and can be even better if you set it up the way you used to date. You know, one of the things women love to do is take their time getting dressed and primping and looking pretty for their sweetheart. And I always tell my couples, if you really want to make date night fun, have the guy get dressed early and just, you know, go get the car washed, go get his shoes polished, go to the floors, do something, but give her time to floss and gloss and get all pretty, and then meet at the door and start your date with a kiss and end your date in the car with a kiss. And don't do the same old thing all the time. And for God's sakes, don't talk about the same old stuff. Because if you really want date night to reinvigorate the relationship, make it more of a date and not so much, you know, with him sitting in the car waiting for her to hurry up and get dressed, or are you ready, or let's go, or even getting dressed separately and preparing yourself for the date can add a lot of fun and spice to that night.
Sheila's right. You want to prioritize that time. So some of the ground rules on this protected time or date night is you do want to not talk about things, constraints that get in the way. Generally don't want to talk about work or the kids or things that you normally talk about. And you want to eliminate all distractions like cell phones. And in fact, now you go into a restaurant, and I'm certainly guilty of this, and you observe couples when they're out on this, they're on the smartphone, they're in their email during the dinner, or they're planning dates where there's not a lot of interaction involved, a movie or something like that. So you want to do things that are going to prioritize real kind of moments of connection, having fun together that pave the way to deeper conversation, emotional intimacy, and then obviously at the end of date night, if everything's going right, it doesn't have to happen, but if you're feeling connected emotionally, usually it leads to some type of physical, sexual connection, which we know is very important even in these long-term enduring relationships.
Now, Sheila, you talk about a 4-step process to help couples create and sustain a relationship. Let's hit on those 4. What do people need to know?
Well, the first step is to do what I call recreate the dating you, and that's to make sure that you are the person that you want to be. And, you know, when you think back to when you were dating and you were single, you had a sense of independence. You made decisions on your own. Nobody questioned you. You took classes. You did what you wanted to do. If you left the bed unmade, nobody yelled at you. And when you meld your life with another person, especially in a long-term relationship, you can lose your sense of independence. Sometimes you can stop doing the things that are on your to-do list that make you interesting and interested in the world. And so one of the things I suggest when your relationship is not exactly what you want to be is the first step is to start with yourself. What changes do you need to make? What crap do you have in your life that you need to get rid of? Do you have self-esteem problems? Do you have lack of confidence? Those things can be killers to a relationship. But also, you need to start creating that bucket list and doing things that make you interesting and fulfill you as a person.
Sheila, you're exactly right. I just want to jump in. There's a lot of research that talks about this notion of we think we get our happiness through other people, which is in some respects true, but this idea of self-validated intimacy, that you have to like yourself and you have to feel worthy in yourself to really feel good in a relationship. And if you don't like yourself, you can't expect your partner to like you. And very often in these relationships, our partner tries to give us a really good compliment or something they really believe. But if we don't believe it in ourselves, it kind of rings hollow or saccharine, and it doesn't work. So this idea also, if you are looking for all of your happiness rises and falls with your spouse, that's too much pressure for that other spouse. So you have to be able to do some of that on your own, especially in a long-term relationship.
Yeah, and I think you have to be willing to say what's not working. I mean, one of the things I say is that you should use your negative emotions as teaching, as learning opportunities. You know, if you're out at a party and you feel some jealousy because you see your husband talking to another woman, maybe you have reason to be jealous, but usually you don't. And you need to examine those negative emotions, say, what do I need to learn from this about myself? Do I have an insecurity issue that I need to deal with? Because that stuff just gets in the way. I mean, my first husband, when I married, I was a mess. I had no.
How old were you at the time? You were young.
Oh, I was very young. I was like 21, and I was so desperate to prove that I was lovable. The first guy dumb enough to ask me to marry him, I said sure. And I didn't have the ability to let him love me because I didn't love myself. And so I could never believe that he would really love me. And so until you love yourself, it's impossible to accept genuine love from another person. And it's just going to, it'll destroy the relationship. You might say married forever, but it's not going to be the intimate kind of relationship that both of you want. So step one to redating is to turn yourself into somebody that you would want to date, somebody that you would want to be with. Be interesting, be interested. Don't use your spouse as the excuse for not doing the things that you want to do to fulfill your life. Spouses are easy. We can always say, oh, I can't go trek in Nepal because he couldn't live without me, or, oh, I can't do this because she won't let me. Most of that time, we're just making excuses. Those aren't real reasons. And so we need to get over that and have a great relationship with ourselves is step number one.
I always say I've never seen any relationship where one person is 100% of the problem. And another thing that stops people from redating is holding on to these resentments or blaming your partner for everything. So individuals are successful in this kind of re-experiencing, redating their spouse in so much as the fact that they can take stock, they can look at what they're doing. And a lot of that is, as you said, not only learning to love yourself, but letting go of these resentments that you've held on to historically in the relationship. You hold on to that. It makes things toxic. It makes it hard to do what we're talking about this hour. So you got to be able to let that go and take accountability for your part in your relationship.
That's right. That's what step three. As part of step three, we bumped over step two, but let's just talk about step three for a minute, which is to reawaken a dating mindset by nixing all that negativity and getting a positive point of view and a positive mindset. Our natural human tendency is to be negative. We have a negativity bias. We had to learn from negative experiences our ancestors did, or we wouldn't be here today. And research shows that it takes 5 positives to overcome 1 negative. Well, when you look at that, it's pretty easy to see that you could end up in the doghouse. And over a long haul, a lot of resentment and a lot of stuff builds up, most of it not built on the truth, most of it built on false belief and false perceptions. But you're absolutely right. Unless you're willing to let go of the past, and let go of all those, that negative energy, negative thoughts about yourself, negative thoughts about your spouse, and get back to a positive state of mind, the same state of mind you had when you were dating. Remember when you were dating? He was a perfect 10. She was a perfect 10. Everything that he or she did was either wonderful or...
Hey, my wife was an 11.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and one day we wake up and realize our perfect 10 is really a flawed 6 or 7.
Right.
And what we don't realize is that our partners have that same recollection or same epiphany about us.
Yeah.
That they don't think we're a 10 either. They may not say anything, but... that can be very disappointing, especially over the long haul.
A couple things Sheila's talking about. Dr. John Gottman, who's probably our most significant couples researcher, followed couples longitudinally over time to figure out who would make it and who wouldn't. In these enduring relationships, she's right, a 5-to-1 ratio of positive comments to negative, and this idea of what she's describing, negative sentiment override. You become so negative that everything your partner does has a global attribution of being negative, and we really got to counter against that by doing these things we've been talking about.
In a moment, we'll hear about 3 and 4, and we have lots to talk about. The lines are open. What kind of challenges are you faced with, or your friends? 571-0970. Put you right here with us. 571-0970. I'm Dr. Stan Prager with Eli Karam and Sheila Dean. Be right back.
70 WGTK. Let's talk with Dr. Stan Prager, helping you make sense of life's daily challenges and much more on 970 WGTK.
Doctor, my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of years without pride. Now I want to understand. Doctor, my eyes.
All right.
Tell me what you see.
Well, we're trying to put spice back in your marriage or in your relationship. It's called Redate Your Mate. 4 steps to falling in love all over again. Sheila Dean Swiss. And also, Dr. Karam for Steel School. and family therapist, and some of these different things. Guys, for those who may have been just joining us, what are the first two to put?
First two, recreate
more...
the dating you, become the best vision of you, and reawaken a dating mindset by nixing the negative and adopting a positive and generous state of mind towards your sweetheart and yourself.
And what about 3 and 4?
Number 3 is rejuvenate dating behavior by doing again what made you fall in love in the first place. You know, I always say that dating is to marriage what foreplay is to sex. And the one thing that we did when we were dating was engage in everyday emotional foreplay. Everything we did was designed to make our sweetheart fall in love and want to spend the rest of lifetime with us. And unfortunately, we tend to think that once we've sealed the deal with a ring, that just as foreplay isn't necessary once you've had sex until you want to do it again, that emotional foreplay is no longer necessary once you get married. It's not a conscious thought. It's more
give me an
settle
example.
into the routine of being married.
Well, give me an example of emotional foreplay.
Well, emotional foreplay is doing those things for your sweetheart that make her feel good, make him feel good. You know, I'll tell you, the moment I knew I fell in love with my husband was I came home late one night, and it was cold, and I was tired.
He
and
set
I
the trash out.
The corner, and he had stopped by my house and pulled my trash cans to the curb. That's emotional.
I remember
foreplay.
the little things.
It's the little things, you know, and he, for example, one day when I was working on my first book, my husband walked into my office with a bright red strawberry and said, "Here, I want you to have a bright spot in your day." That's emotional foreplay. It's picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, just thinking about you." It's picking up a book that your sweetheart would like. It's doing the things or not doing the things that annoy your sweetheart and that you can easily not do. It's everything that you did when you were dating that seduced your sweetheart into falling in love with you. And we need to do that. I call it racking up frequent foreplay miles. As Dr. Gottman would talk about making deposits into your love bank. I call it racking up frequent foreplay miles, doing the things that build that positive bank account, because we know we're going to screw up inadvertently, even no matter how hard we try. And so we need to have that positive bank of frequent foreplay miles to draw on when we screw up. And so if we go back to thinking about how did we behave when we were dating, how did we treat our sweetheart when we were dating, and we do that again every day, we ask ourselves, what can I do to make my sweetheart stay a little nicer, a little easier? It's just inevitably we're going to create a happier, more positive environment for our relationship.
Those are the things, too, that are the buffers to this negative sentiment override that we were talking about in the last segment, this idea that when these predictable things in any relationship happen, that happen that cause stress or sometimes a misunderstanding, if you have a lot of good experiences in your bank, if you will, and you need to make a withdrawal, you will not be bankrupt in the sense that couples, when they've gotten out of sync, they've stopped doing this. It's very easy to make negative attributions or negative interpretations to your other partner's behavior.
Yeah.
But when you're connected or when you have these kind of random acts of kindness, if you will, that Sheila's talking about, you're less likely to make negative interpretations when your partner and you get out of sync. And there's also a lot of research that says when you leave in the morning, when you have reunion at the end of the day, it's these little moment of connections. I mean, big trips, nice presents, those things are great.
Right.
But the building blocks to these long-term couples, the masters of marriage, if you will, are these kind of magic 15 minutes in the morning and the evening where you just share your partner's world and you set the stage in this emotional foreplay, as Sheila's talking about. You set the stage for something later when you can have more time together. But this idea, if you're neglecting knowing what's going on with your partner, even for a couple days, you're operating on out of date knowledge of your partner's life. So you got to make the effort to do these things that she's talking about.
Well, and once when you have that positive state of mind and your partner has built up this bank of goodwill, you understand that your partner's coming from a place of good intention. And so when there are misunderstandings, it's easier to say, you know what, it's just a misunderstanding. I know you never come from a place of ill will. I mean, if my husband steps on my toes, which is rare, but if he does, I always know he's coming from a good place. so I'm much less likely to be annoyed with him because he's just such a good guy and engages in this emotional foreplay all the time. Whereas if he's withdrawing, when people are withdrawing from your emotional bank account and you go overdrawn, it's really hard to make that up. So it's really important. Those everyday little things make all the difference in the world. No relationship is healthy one day and over the next. Every relationship that fails, I believe, suffers death by 1,000 cuts. And it's those little cuts that eventually will kill the relationship, even if it ultimately ends in something as traumatic as infidelity.
How do you handle when I've had several patients, well, not several, I've had a couple of patients recently, I've had several over the years, where one partner had infidelity, and the other partner says, well, I can forgive her, but I'll never forget.
Well, I don't think you can forget. How do you forget something like that? I mean, forgiving doesn't require forgetting. Forgiving means letting go and not having. To me, forgiveness is I no longer want to hurt you back. I no longer feel so angry that I feel a need to make you pay or to make you hurt the way I hurt when I went through this. Forgiveness is letting go of your negative emotions about it. It's not about forgetting.
What do you think, Dr. Karam?
Well, recovering from infidelity is a tough thing, but most people, when we could do a whole show and have on that before, but most people think if you are connected to your partner in the way that we're talking about, your nurturing relationship, breaches of trust, things like that don't happen. But it's easy to get out of sync. And again, if you are not nurturing your relationship, you leave yourself open to attraction from other people or potential warning signs out there. So you have to work on the relationship, and you have to also be able to share with them, I'm hoping we can talk about in the next segment, the deeper core of yourself, your hopes, your fears, and your biggest anxieties with your partner. If you can't show that vulnerability, you can't also have this deep kind of relationship.
All right, Sheila Deans and Dr. Eli Karam. I'm Dr. Stan Frager. 571-0970. By the way, I got 4 tickets to Corsair Shrine Circus I want to give away. Give me a call.
970 WGTK.
Owen Funeral Home, a Louisville tradition since 1939. The Owen family is someone your family can trust when you need help the most. Some families are numbed by their loss, some shattered. They say, this is someone we love.
Dr. Howard, Dr. Fine, Dr. Frager.
You found Let's Talk with Dr. Stan Frager. Dr. Stan Frager is standing by to give you insight on issues that matter most to you. Call now, 571-0970.
Hi, and welcome. So we're talking about what it takes in a relationship to keep it going. And I know, Sheila, you have a 4-step about revitalizing your marriage and making it work for you. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the 4th step to redating is to revitalize your marriage model. The reasons why you got married don't have to be the reasons why you stay married. And your marriage doesn't have to look the same as it did the day you got married. And, this book talks specifically to boomers. And most boomers got married under, or were certainly raised by parents who were married under the husband as breadwinner model. And at a time when women's income was, if she worked at all, was seen as supplemental. And over the course of the boomer generation, we've had the sexual revolution, the women's liberation movement, the civil rights movement, and in really the twinkling of an eye, in terms of historical time, marriage has changed dramatically to a more egalitarian model. And so a lot of boomers who have, built their nest, raised their kids, a lot of the men are ready to retire. A lot of the women are ready to start a career now that they've got their kids raised. And so things need to change in the model of your marriage, and you don't have to throw everything out. There's a lot that's going to work for you, but there may be things that don't work for you anymore. So I think it's really important for couples to sit down and say, okay, what do we need to change in how we structure our marriage so that it works for us today?
Yeah, Sheila's exactly right in this idea that I always tell couples we only know really about two relationships. That's of the one that we're in, and that of our blueprint, which usually came from our parents or our family of origin. So if we have a blueprint that is, because the day and age in which we live is no longer current, or it never worked for us anyway, even if our parents did it, or we didn't see it even work for our parents. You have to, as she says, explore this at this stage of life. And also, couples are as successful as there is some type of shared dream. If you feel like you have made sacrifices for your spouse or for the family, and you look at this time after your children have launched as to be focused on you, and your spouse, or your husband or your wife, whatever it may be, is not supportive of your dream, or you can't find a shared dream, you're going to be in trouble. So it's time for couples to kind of recontract for the next part of their life and to find a shared space, but also some individual passions and things that you want to do for you. And your spouse doesn't have to be involved in all those, but they certainly have to support your right to do it.
In fact, I think it's even good when you have separate interests because it gives you things to talk about, things to share, things to learn from each other. And my husband and I have been together now for almost 20 years total, and I still learn things from him because he reads different books than I read. He has a greater interest in music. I have a greater interest in relationships. So he doesn't always read the books that I read on relationships. But, it gives us something to talk about and something to share. And I still learn from him. And we can fall into the trap of thinking that we know everything there is to know about our spouse and there's nothing new to hear. And there's always something new to hear because every day changes you. The news changes your perception. The book you read changes your perception. The class that you took. And if you just take the time to really talk about those things, sometimes my husband and I will go to a movie and we might spend 2 hours longer than it took to watch the movie talking about the movie and what it meant and how we perceived it. It's so important for couples to really know each other, and to make a mistake and think that you know everything there is to know means you're going to be bored, and if you're bored, you're not talking, you're falling into a rut, and you really, that's not a good thing. You want to make sure that you're interesting and interested.
Right. The opposite of boredom is curiosity. And these couples,
yeah.
We've been referencing this longitudinal research, and it says the exact same thing. Long after kind of looks fade, even sexual passion dwindles, the friendship component of the relationship is the most important. And think of your best friend out there, and maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's not, but what do best friends do? They stay curious about each other. Even if it's gone weeks or months between they've talked, they find out what's going on with their partner, and a lot of things can change, as Sheila said. So to be curious about your partner's world, or to, and for a lot of couples, they get really scary for them when they realize they are losing that curiosity for their partners. So to nurture that is so important. Sheila, I had one other point that I wanted to get your opinion on. When couples sometimes come together or when they get stuck, and on the surface things look like they're going fine for this generation. They're moving towards retirement. They have saved their money. Their kids are fairly well adjusted, but they find themselves not being able to kind of cut through that extra layer with their partner, i.e. share their fears or their anxieties. They do things on the surface together, but they can't really connect in this deeper way. And sometimes men especially believe that showing vulnerability or weakness actually is a bad thing. It makes you feel weak or less than in your partner's eyes. But in the context of committed, enduring relationships, we find showing your vulnerability, sharing that with your spouse, it's an essential type of skill, especially for this boomer generation. I'm wondering what you think about that, about kind of going down a level deeper and sharing your fears and anxieties with your partner.
Well, I think that is the key to the ultimate intimacy that we all want. But it's scary. It's scary to talk about your fears, especially if you are worried that it's going to change how your partner feels about you. That's pretty risky.